This article is the second article that I was discussing earlier, and it has a better review lit on instructional design. This says instructional design is the plan, organization for the effective learning of the students. Instruction is not only the training by the development of the new technology presentation and representation of the reality or information change. So instructional design is planning, organizing for effective learning of students. So instruction is not that very important. It's about how to train someone to teach. This first little page right here says 21st century is called the information age, which is true. Technology, which is the basis of globalization. Technology, you'll see that underlying theme throughout any kind of effective instruction discussion, that technology is a major component of all of the new eras. Establishing and creating learning environments. While teachers are teaching their content knowledge, they should follow developing learning techniques, activities, and technological improvements to support their teachings. All instruction consists of experiences. Not all education is instruction. So all instruction consists of experiences, and not all education is instruction. Instruction is a part of education because all instruction consists of experiences leading to learning. Think of the best instructors you have and how they're always talking about and relating to stories. Let's go down. Let's really start getting into the research. Individuals have different learning styles and characteristics because of that reason. You see that throughout all the research over and over and over again, that people have different learning styles. The role of the teacher at instructional design can be listed as below according to constructivist approach. So at this point, I would really want you to pull up some research, pull up a video on constructivism. And you can go to YouTube and you can find all those videos on that. There's no sense in me pulling up that video at this time. But look at constructivism because instructional design really relies on that theory heavily. Look at these approaches. Teachers should be in consciousness of learner autonomy, which means students learn on their own, and we need to be aware of that whenever we're teaching, that students have their own style of learning. Teachers should be aware of the individual differences of them. Aware, but really conscious and modifying will be a different approach. Teachers should use real and current information to transmit knowledge. In other words, teachers should be well-educated and ongoing researcher in order to reflect information. We see this throughout all of education, and I believe that this is my personal opinion, this is one of the biggest weaknesses that we have in education, this concept that once you receive a teaching certificate, for some reason some people just stop wanting to become a better teacher. They stop wanting to learn. Of course, you are listening to this lecture because you're wanting to learn. But you'll see that whenever you're in the field of education, that many teachers sort of stop learning. Now, if they're a history teacher, for example, they're going to keep learning about history. They may read a book every now and then. They may have a summer reading. But they also forget this idea that they need to modify their teaching approaches and learn new things. On a real-world story, this happened to me several years ago whenever I'll go all the way back. When I started as College of Education as a professor, they had this training for online platforms and online learning that, and they called it WebCT. So I did the WebCT, and the university was very happy that I did that. But then I kind of stopped learning online development, and I was like, this is I got bored with it, and I just went back to teaching. And then I started noticing that I was getting behind times. People would talk about Web 2.0 or cloud technology, and I'd kind of like, okay. Professors would come in and they'd have this new technology, and I really wouldn't take a hold of that. And what I found was point number 2 is I wasn't trying to stay current with the information of technology and teaching. People would say, oh, you should know technology. And I was like, so you definitely need to find out what your weaknesses are and make sure that you're pushing that. And so after that, I just started learning more material. It actually came to a head finally because they kept changing. The WebCT became Blackboard, and Blackboard became Blackboard 2.0 and Blackboard Collaborate. And I started using it, and I found the learning curve was pretty steep for me. But then I started realizing that that really wasn't a good platform. So I started branching out and learning different platforms. And of course, I use Camtasia now, and I'm trying to catch up with that. And I feel like I'm doing better with that. But you definitely see this a lot. Teachers, you need to recognize it. So what I found was I found a weakness in myself, and I try to make myself better. And hopefully that's gotten better. Look, this teacher should give the importance of thoughts of students. They should possess the research environment to the students in order to search and evaluate their experiences. So students, you need to think about how your students think. Teachers should be aware of the individual differences. That's already been mentioned. Teachers should know the students' prerequisite skills. Pre-testing, where do you stand? Of course, when I'm teaching any kind of course, when I teach a smaller course, especially a course of students that I've advised, I can kind of get that sense of I know where they are in their program of study, and I know what they need to learn. So that does help. But whenever you're teaching 30 students, like one time I taught social foundations, and I had 30 students in there, and I had to really assess what they knew and what they didn't know, and so it took a lot of pre-test. Teachers are the main communicators to establish interaction between the teacher and the students. You are the initiator. Before we get too in-depth in this article, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to flip to a video on how to become a really good instructional designer or curriculum coordinator. That was the term I used in the previous video.
Today I want to talk to you about what it takes to become an instructional design master. I frequently get instructional designers or people who are trying to enter the field of instructional design asking me for advice on how to gain experience or what kind of education they should take to get into the instructional design field and to look better to prospective clients. I thought that I'd put together a short little video giving some from my heart advice to those people and others. Let me start with a story. A couple of months ago, I went to a hairdresser in Vancouver. There, what they had is a scale of people that you could have work on your hair. The top level was called a hairdressing master. Of course, I'd want a master to work on my hair, so I paid a little extra so the master could do it. Then when I'm, sitting, this woman's cutting my hair, I ask her, well, what does it take to become a master, in your field? And she told me, well, I've been doing it a very long time. That might sound familiar because I've seen a lot of profiles on LinkedIn where it says, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been a trainer. I've been a facilitator for 30 years. Okay, that to me is yes, you've had a chance to gain mastery, but mastery is not duration alone. That's like saying that the guy with an MBA just getting out of school is less experienced to run a company than the guy who's been building widgets for that company for the past 30 years. I mean, he's been there longer, right? It doesn't make him a better leader. What we have to think about is that experience and duration in experience is one thing, but how do we improve the quality of our skills? As I'm thinking about this, I asked this hairdresser, well, you said you're a master, so does that mean that you participate in those, hairdressing competitions where everybody competes and you get to learn new techniques and go to new courses? And she said, I don't like doing that. I think it's too much time investment, and I really just like hairdressing. I really just like cutting hair. And I thought, would I go to somebody who refuses to learn new things? Would I seek somebody's advice who's never actually asked for feedback about their methods? And that's what my advice is to people who enter the instructional design profession, that you start creating content. And a lot of times I see discussions online where, something is presented or we're asking questions about hypothetical methods, and there's a lot of feedback and there's a lot of opinions, but there's not enough actually putting those kinds of opinions into actual learning. What does that manifest itself? And I see a lot of people going, oh, I could see this really used a lot in learning, and I like them to tell me what kind of applications would they see, and for them to actually build it out. And a lot of instructional designers will say, well, I want to build things, but I don't have the resources. I'm not a big company. I don't have the money to buy that software. There's a lot of stuff out there like Articulate or Captivate. They offer free trials for the first 30 days. So if you are an instructional designer who's into rapid development, who wants to build something quickly and effectively, there's very little ramp-up time to get anything going. And also, you get your feet a little bit wet, And you're basically telling a prospective employer that you're a doer, that you actually take those things you're talking about, those IB things that nobody else understands, and actually applying them to make good e-learning. That's basically what I suggest, is put out product, put out stuff, get feedback, get it out there, and get better, because that's what makes you better, is all that uncomfortable feedback where people sometimes don't like your stuff, or they do, you improve on those methods, and that's how you become a true master. If you like this video, or if you like kittens, then please give me a thumbs up below, or if you really liked it, you can add it to your favorites. Also, I suggest, if you're into this content, that you hit the subscribe button that's up there. And the other thing I'm looking for from you is that if you find that you have some ideas that you'd like me to discuss on these videos, please let me know via the comments. And if you have any comments of your own regarding the somewhat touchy topic I discussed today, then please, I'd love to hear your feedback, because that's how we gain mastery. And I will see you next time.
As we continue the article, it says right here, also strategies for instructional development for effective learning, like educators should choose instructional strategies because, number one, instruction means plans, design and open, flexible, alternative-based teaching learning processes on the basis of type and level of student performance expressed in your instructional objectives. And we know that because we know how to do lesson plans. Subject matter area, student strengths, information derived from learning theory, and research insights. So this talks about that first part about assessing your students and what they need to know. A constructivist approach requires using experience, a real picture of things for better learning. In the global context, technology is the alternative to motivate. So this is where the article comes back to, and it's talking about instructional design, but it keeps also saying, hey, all of this can be done with technology, and technology is the major component. And that gets into the research, which is very good. Martin, 98, considers how much of the instructional process instructional designers should control by pre-planning, managing, and he says whether the designer who plans the instruction or the student is responsible for student learning. Whether or not the continuity of instruction can be managed, how instructional design can encourage. So this gets you a little bit deeper into the mind of a curriculum coordinator, that what they're saying is, whenever I'm creating this and I'm planning this, how much, and here's the key word, control will that teacher have over that agenda. Assume too much responsibilities when the students fail to learn, and many teachers feel that. Whenever this is a big effect we have with new teachers. So we've created this instructional design where we're training teachers on how to be teachers, and that's the Mississippi State way. And what we found is many times new teachers actually put too much responsibility on themselves as failures when their students fail. And we have to tell them that they don't need to do that, and we try to train better than that. There's no guarantee that each learner will succeed without internal motivation, and that's what that says. As an instructional designer, you need to be aware that sometimes students will not learn unless they're motivated. And then sometimes you have to be motivated within yourself. Let's say I tell everybody, hey, let's go outside and learn how. I've created this instructional design, and I'm going to train people on how to oil. And but you get things, I don't want to do this. And if you're not motivated to get underneath that hood of that car and change oil, then nothing I can do to make you learn. Merrill, 1971, proposed that teaching teams should consist of, so this is the actual teaching team, an instructional designer, instructional interaction, interpersonal design, interpersonal interaction. So instructional design should always be part of any school's curriculum team. Right here, Baylor discussed the novice instructional design, where students begin instruction in order to better learn information. So there's different kinds of instructional designs. Right here, Mollum discussed that instructional designers believe that it is important to expose pre-service and in-service teachers to an instructional system design, procedures, and products so teachers can utilize them. Educational literature, however, reveals few attempts to relate instructional design theory and methods to teaching practice. So students need to be aware of this, obviously. We're trying to do a better job. Boulder contains talks about the site conference, which are always around. Topics covered included an adapted E-framework for teacher training. E-framework, see, using technology and instructional design to help train teachers on whatever packet you want them to learn. Integration of technology into the curriculum, the World Wide Web, of course. So we're seeing a big element of that. As we scroll down, Lyon Merrill, examine instructional design expert. ID expert is prototype instructional design expert system. So there's different kinds of designs. I don't want to get you swamped with this. Russell and Imperial examined recent advances in AI. And here's what they said, that it was possible to develop successful, intelligent, computer-aided instructional systems. So this goes back to the first article, that under true great instructional design, where you're training people on a packet on how they're going to teach, you can actually pull the teacher away. And I mentioned that earlier. And that's what these called CADs are called, these computer-aided design environments. So what a CAD unit is it's an online technology-rich program that trains someone how to be a teacher, or whatever you're trying to train them. So let me give you a real world example. I'm trying to create instructional design for, let's say, the DMV project that you saw earlier. So you're trying to create an instructional design to teach people how to use the DMV and how they can learn themselves. Well, what you can do with that CAD system is you can create a CAD system where the educator gets pulled away from that. So many times you see these CAD units online. They're actually getting really good at it too. Kirk mentioned that during the past 3 years, the role of the instructional system designer has taken on a greater significance for instructors. This is because many faculty members have been asked to put their entire courses online over the World Wide Web. So this has become a major component of higher education. And this has become a tipping point for some faculty members. What they say, and this is just, I'm going to give you an inside the world of this. What universities have started doing, especially around 2000, universities have found and discovered that online instruction is a major moneymaker because they can get more students outside their realm. So I'm going to teach you a very boring lecture real quick to give you a breakdown of that. Let me give you an example. So the University of Mississippi and Mississippi State University and all the major universities, Southern, all the major universities. Long time ago, the state of Mississippi was divided and certain areas went to certain schools. For example, Meridian, Mississippi was Southern and MSU during the chaos days. They actually had a trailer at MCC where they had 2 Mississippi State professors and 1 Southern Miss professor. And meanwhile, they were negotiating on all the areas. And the final decision was that Southern Mississippi would get the coast, and that MSU would get Meridian. So many people say, well, what happened to the Southern professor? They asked him if he wanted to work for Mississippi State, and he said, sure. So he didn't lose his job. He just switched over. But that's how that worked. And the reason I tell you that is Ole Miss got Tupelo. Grenada goes to Ole Miss. Mississippi State gets Meridian, Starkville, and I think they have also another branch campus. And Southern got some of the coast regions. So everyone got divided up. Well, because of that, Mississippi State University cannot open a campus in Hattiesburg, and vice versa. Ole Miss cannot open up a campus in Starkville or in that area because those areas are now locked down by IHL. But with online instruction, you can extend your zone of influence and actually open your enrollment that way. So a long time ago, universities really started stressing for online instruction. But here was the issue. They couldn't get the professors to create instructional design the courses. So some professors would say, sure, we'll do this. We'll do online. So they did the online, and then they teach the class, and then they leave, and then that's it. And then they take the material with them. So universities started paying professors to create what they call shells, but that is really instructionally designing a course. They instructionally designed a course, which they then give to the university for a fee, and the university can use that design over and over and over again and just put in adjuncts. That is a perfect example of instructional designing. What you're doing is you're creating a shell, that can be used over and over again, no matter what professor you put in there. Now, some of y'all may have tried some of these online courses, and it's very cut and copy, cut and paste. Now, I am a victim of, I do some of this, but I do not do it to some of the degree of other universities. Other universities really abuse the cut and copy. And what I'm talking about is you enroll in English Comp online for University of, say, Phoenix or whatever, and they're going to have all the syllabus, all the assignments, everything already created. The professor then just goes in there, and the professor's job is just to grade. And that's it's not a very personable approach. I'm guilty because I reuse some of my lectures, but I don't reuse them to the extent. I probably would not sell my lectures to let someone. That would be awkward if you let someone else use your lectures. So that is instructional design 101 right there. On another side note, many universities had to have a question about that, was if a professor teaches an online course and he archives videos, who owns the right to those videos? And that's still up in the air. That's never really been proven. It's kind of taken the side of the professor, but I've seen some universities say it's theirs, and that's kind of a questionable approach. Branch and others developed the hypothesis that planning activities of classroom teachers correlate, which means there's a relationship with the practices of instructional design professionals, is explored within the content of the study. So planning activities of classroom teachers has a comparison with practice of instructional design. So the way you plan as an educator also correlates with what instructional designers do. So that's why educators make good curriculum coordinators, because they're already doing this. It is suggested that some instructional design practices may be beyond the realm of manipulation by public school teachers. Some designs are too complicated, and you need to be aware of that whenever you are, and that's why we have specialists in this. That's why you become an instructional design expert. So the last video I'm going to show, because this has been a two-part lecture, is I'm going to show you a TED Talk on creating the perfect classroom. So this person is giving you an example of how she did an instructional design for her classroom, and she did a really good job. So this is just a TED Talk, and then that'll be the end of the video. So I hope you enjoyed it.
So I am part of the grassroots of American education, and I'm here to tell you a story about what works in education, and to tell you that the way we're headed today doesn't work. So this was my first class. My first class are my three daughters, Susan, Janet, and Anne. And something that everybody should know: parents are the first teachers of their children. They don't think of themselves that way, because when you go from the home, from the hospital, you get a list of vaccinations, how to feed them, how to change the diapers, but nobody ever tells you that you really are the child's first teacher. So something exciting happened to me in 1984, and that was I was hired as a full-time teacher at Palo Alto High School. And this is what I taught: 4 classes of English, 1 class of journalism. And in the journalism program, I had 19 kids, and we produced 1 8-page newspaper called the Campanile, twice a month. This was my equipment. I had a typewriter, and everybody had to type up their stories, and then I used to hand out X-Acto knives to all the students. Can you imagine doing that today? And then we pasted up the stories on a pasteboard, and then we used hot wax to make it work. So this was what happened in 1984, Palo Alto High School. It's a public high school, by the way. So this was also what I had when I first arrived. I was supposed to teach students in rows. Everybody sat in a row, you raised your hand, you had a textbook, you read the textbook, and on Friday you usually had a test. And so I realized after about 3 months at the school that either I was going to have to quit, or I was going to have to get a therapist, or I was going to throw away the book. And that's what I did. I threw out the textbook and I waited to be fired. And fortunately, they didn't notice. It's amazing. And I replaced the textbook with the real thing. New York Times, Mercury News, other newspapers. So that's what we studied since we were doing journalism. You know, why not study the real thing? Have them have a real model. At the same time, something else happened that was kind of revolutionary for me, and that was Macintosh. I went down the street one day, and there in the store was this device that was just like revolutionary. And I thought to myself, I would like to have one of those. The only problem was that they cost about $3,000, and on a teacher's salary, I couldn't afford it. So instead, I decided to be really clever. I would write a grant to the state of California and see whether I could get them for my classroom. And so I succeeded, and I got 8 Macintoshes. And they arrived, can you imagine, the school just delivered them in the back of my classroom. Nothing else, just they showed up in big boxes. So I had to say to my students at that point that I had no idea what I was doing. And that, you know, if I was going to succeed with reports on this grant, that they were going to have to help me. And so it's amazing what happened as a result of that. They got super excited, and they're like, oh my God, I can hardly wait to help you. They were there in the afternoon, they stayed in the evening, they were on weekends. We learned how to use the Macintoshes together. I learned words that I never even knew what they meant before, like network. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything. But by the end of a couple months, we succeeded in getting these things up and working. However, the culture at the time was that, you know, you had to have students sitting in rows and also answering questions, raising their hands, you know, not just, not talking to each other. And actually, that culture still exists in America today. So this is what my classroom was supposed to look like. However, 2 months afterward, the principal came in with some other administrators to evaluate me. And what he found was what he said. He's like, my God, who's in charge here? Looks like the kids are in charge. I mean, look at all the work. They're talking to each other. My God, this is terrible. And so they said, we're coming back in 2 weeks, and if you don't straighten out this classroom in 2 weeks, you are history. So I decided I would use my collaborators to help me again, and I told them that I was getting ready to be fired because of my teaching methods. And so I said, you know, the next time they come back, I want you to all sit in rows, raise your hand, not a word, silence. So they came back, and sure enough, the class was like mute. No one said anything. I passed, and as you see, I'm still here at Palo Alto High School. So this is basically a picture of my class today. This is what it looks like. We have collaborative learning. You see other pictures of kids working together. These are more pictures of kids working together in the classroom. My whole program is based on collaborative learning. This is a class, my class this year has 80 students in it, so it's 88 to 1. The reason it can be 80 to 1 is because they are working in teams. I'm not telling them what to do. It's kind of like the orchestra conductor. I'm not playing the instruments. They are doing the work, and I am facilitating that work. So today at Palo Alto High School, from those 19 students, we have 600 kids electing to take journalism, 5 additional teachers, and we have also 10 different publications today at Palo Alto High School. So on the circular table by the stairs, you can pick up some of the publications, and I'll show you what they look like. So we have that same student newspaper, have In Focus, which is a television program, Verde, which is a news magazine. It's 80 pages every 6 weeks. Voice, which is a website. Viking, which is a sports magazine. We have a literary magazine, video production, yearbook, a foreign affairs magazine. These are all ideas students came up with themselves. And the last one, the C magazine, just started this year, and I'll show you some pictures of that. So this is what the student newspaper looks like. And it's because the reason it looks as good as it does is because it's all student-generated ideas. It's their newspaper. And here's another example of student newspaper. I don't do anything other than I teach the tools, they do it themselves. So here is lifestyles, and that's the front of a second section. And notice the topic, be a picky eater. Remember how kids are all picky eaters? Well, they wanted to write about it. This is an example of the topics they're writing about. Notice, sex and the student. Now, that's one that, of course, is kind of makes the administration a little nervous, but in fact, it was a very well thought out article. We had this article on hazing, actually eliminated the hazing at the school. So these are articles that students select themselves. Here is another example of student art. Another one, this is the front cover. They do everything. Here's an example of the website. And this is the magazine I just started this year, and they're trying to copy the New York Times, you can see. So this is the C magazine, as opposed to the T magazine for the New York Times. This is table of contents. This is a story that they wrote, beautiful clothes, ugly truth. So all publications are self-supporting. They raise money by the way that newspapers raise money. They sell advertising. And they succeed in selling advertising. Our advertising rates are about 1/10 of a professional newspaper. And so it's easy, and we mail to the whole community. So we have a circulation of about 5,000. So this is an example of what an ad looks like. So what's the key to engaging these kids? Well, I put it together in a little acronym. I had my students help me do this, and it's called TRICK. Trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. This is what every class needs, not just media studies, not just journalism. Every single class needs that. And it should happen in most schools. It happens in a lot of schools, but it doesn't happen in all the schools. And parents are the first teachers, so TRICK really starts at home. Parents need to treat their children with trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. So here's a block that we have in America today. America doesn't trust its teachers. So we have high-stakes testing. You know what that really is? It's a test of the teachers. Parents don't trust their kids. They micromanage their kids. You're not doing your work. Teachers don't trust the kids. They can't turn around and write on the board. They're afraid something will happen. So as a result, kids in general sometimes don't believe in themselves. So trust is very important. You get that normally in a really high-performing school. Respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. Dropout rate today in America is 35%. 7 million kids a year drop out of high school. Reasons for dropping out: they don't feel kindness. They don't feel any warmth. School's not relevant to the real world. They have difficult home life, economic issues, other ways to learn. Never before have so many people had access to so much information. You can learn 24/7. I bet all of you have some kind of electronic device in your pocket. Thank you, Google. You can find all that information, or thank you, all the search engines out there. Many schools today, unfortunately, still look like that picture I showed you earlier, like they did 100 years ago. And they feel threatened by technology. On the other hand, teachers should see the web as support for their classroom. So what kind of action can you take to help? You're all supposed to be helping here. We're very excited to have you. Forget blaming teachers. Look what used to happen in 1969. The kid wasn't doing well in class. It was the student's fault, right? Today, if the student's not doing well in class, whose fault is it? It's the teacher's fault. We need to trust teachers, fight against high-stakes testing. That doesn't mean you don't have high standards. That doesn't mean you don't have testing. It's just, let's not tie testing to teachers' salaries. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. So we need to help schools of education change. Teachers need to learn to use tech in the classroom. We need to support technology training for teachers. And we need to support something called blended learning. 50% lecture, 50% project-based learning. Students learn by doing. They don't learn by listening to me talk. We have projects in math, projects in computer science, projects in science, and projects in language arts, the ones I just showed you right now, media studies. So media studies supports the Common Core State Standards, teaches critical thinking, collaboration, communication skills. These are some of the things, just a variety of everything you learn in media studies. Students do it on their own. And I can't emphasize enough. Media arts brings the community into the school and brings the classroom into the community. Can this type of education be scaled? It can if parents learn to treat their kids with kindness. Trick. It all starts with you. First, treat yourself that way with kindness. Treat your kids with kindness. Call to action. Let's support policies that treat teachers with trust and respect. That's the kind of trust and respect that they tend to get in the private schools. We need to have that same thing in the public schools. 90% of our students today are in public schools. We need to change the culture of the classroom so that students have trust and respect. And I would like to suggest policy changes everywhere so that we can make students actually engaged with their learning. Thank you.